any of you who are thinking of working in the AI business, this should be useful to you. Natalie here is a spectacular CTO engineering lead at Duolingo. Been there for 10 years and basically joined the company when it only imagined ever making revenue to kind of over 100 million MAUs, and one of the first money-making consumer AI apps. And Kylan on the other side is in a new code that in world that is finding consumer AI companies that can't scale. They build kind of a shitty first draft, they get customer fit, and then it dies. So if you're early and later on you're going to be so successful you got to grow to 1,000 employees, you're going to hear from both sides. So Natalie, would you start and talk about the video call with Lily, for anybody who hasn't seen it, kind of what the consumer experience is and what the challenge was?
Has anybody, who here has tried video call? Okay, that's a bunch of people, that's great. Yeah, I've been at Duolingo for 10 years, and for all of that time, a lot of our learners would ask us, can't you build a conversation feature? What we really want to do is practice our conversation. And we tried a few times actually before this video call with Lily feature. We tried using actual humans, human tutors. And you would think that would probably be the best solution, but it turns out that it didn't work very well because of a couple of reasons. One is that the best human tutors are really, really good, but the average human tutor isn't that great. And probably the more important reason is that there's a lot of social anxiety around talking with humans, especially when you're learning a language. So we found that we had this idea once the LLMs came out that we could build something that was really good quality, that was an AI tutor, that would meet learners where they're at in terms of where they are in their learning experience. And the challenges here, there's still a lot of challenges, right? So we built this kind of like face-to-face video call experience, kind of like FaceTime, but with your AI tutor. And the challenges here are that learners have a very, very limited vocabulary. So it's really a highly constrained problem of being able to have what's an engaging conversation with somebody who is still learning a language. And if you try this with an out-of-the-box, like with ChatGPT out of the box, it's really good at having conversations with fluent speakers. But out of the box, these foundational models are actually not that great with really early language learners.
And the way the app starts, literally you hear a telephone ringing, and purple-haired Lily shows up and starts talking to me in Spanish and jumps right in. I think we're on like the third or fourth iteration of the app right now. And she starts talking at human speed, which is a problem for many learners whose language fluency is below 40. I think 40 is basic read-write fluency, and 110 is fluency to get into a college as an ESL. And so if you're only 40, you got to hustle to keep up. So my trick is always to interrupt her and hola Lily, ¿qué tal? And then she'll stop, and now she'll give me a little time to catch up.
Yeah, and we're working on reimagining that early learner experience. Actually, you'll be happy to see this, Bing. We're bringing in Falstaff the bear to help with early learners, and a much more guided, structured initial conversation.
And then at the end, the other thing that's great for those of you who are in learning, you understand that transcription actually works better than voice generation. And so at the end of a call with Lily, you see a transcription of what the app thinks you just said. So if you're an early learner like me, there's a lot of and ah. And I say K and como when I'm kind of saying in Spanish, and all that shows up transcribed. So the transcription is very embarrassing. But it is kind of after action learning.
Yeah. And it's we have half of our users are learning English, and for those English learners, a lot of them are more advanced, all over the world. And we actually found that the usage for English learners is higher in terms of the number of video calls per day that they do.
And then with Lily, is it OpenAI and 11 Labs? Who do we pay money to for?
It's mostly OpenAI. Yeah. Our AI bill is quite high.
And what does the engineering team do to try to reduce the engineering bill?
So,
Because you've doubled and tripled the length per conversation.
yeah. So I should say that our main priority is creating a really, really good feature. That's what comes first. And then we care second about the speed of product duration, and only third about cost. Now that said, we do still care about cost because it's a really big bill. One thing is we can just wait, right? We can just wait for OpenAI to reduce costs, and that's been a big part of it. There's actually some interesting learnings we've had around fine-tuning for cost. We've been working on that, but it turns out that fine-tuning is quite brittle. So even if we can, at a moment in time, fine-tune the feature to reduce costs by like 5 times, we change the feature a little bit. So for example, one thing we've been trying to do is increase the number of turns per user in the call, the back and forths. And so we thought we were successful at that, but then we had fine-tuned the model, and the way the fine-tuned model decided to continue the call was saying, bye, done. That kind of broke the feature, so we had to go back to the non-fine-tuned model.
Got it. I'll come back to it. But I was going to ask. It's probably good for Duolingo every time Anthropic raises money because it gives OpenAI a little price competition, but they need to raise more money to do it. So every time Anthropic raises more tens of billions of dollars, it's probably good for us.
The closest to OpenAI for right now for our video call use case is Gemini, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, Gemini 2.5. And they're also closer in terms of the voice-to-voice model, which we're very interested in.
I've seen that in another company. So Kylan, tell me when you're talking to companies that are trying to kind of roll the dice on consumer, where are they getting stuck right now? So Natalie's talking about cost and talking about speed and, of course, intelligence and understanding and EQ.
Yeah, there's a few different points. So I think that there's kind of companies that are, let's say, very early on and have no money, and they're basically saying, we've built something that works. And I think that this is the thing that kind of most people find with AI is you can get to something pretty quickly that feels pretty magical. You can vibe code it, you can just interact with ChatGPT. And so most people you talk to, including some C-level executives, are like, well, I built this thing in like a weekend and it's pretty awesome. Like, why the heck does it take my team like 6 months to ship this thing? And genuinely all the time. And there's a few factors I think that kind of fit into that. So one is, if you've hit a quality bar that you're happy with, you may have cash in the bank and be able to kind of focus on that, or you may be very focused on cost, getting to kind of some kind of acceptable cost bar that you can launch. And that's actually very hard because our general standards of AI interactions are constantly going up, which means that even if you say, okay, I'm just going to wait for the cost to go down, well, there's a new model that comes out, new voice model that comes out that kind of raises the quality bar. So you're kind of always pushed to that quality bar. And so we do a lot of work with them to figure out how do we basically get the same quality that you have today, but at a much lower cost. And that's actually a very hard task because often what people do is they take a model and they stuff in a bunch of prompts and context and everything else in there, and you end up having a huge generation. So splitting that up into a bunch of smaller tasks that are much more efficient into micro tasks that are fine-tuned, you get faster, cheaper, higher quality, more controllable. However, it's a bit more hard to control. On the other side, we see a lot of groups who, kind of to Natalie's second point there, that quality product development, people just stall out in terms of their ability to even be able to iterate. And so they kind of get to a first version very quickly. And then the ability to iterate is kind of what ends up killing them. Because when you have a consumer app, anybody who hears it interact with them, it feels like it maybe stays the same, but they're constantly updating it. And people actually get very stale very quickly or feel very stale very quickly. And so what we see is there's one scenario where people just can't launch because they can't hit the quality cost ratio that they want. On the other side, they basically can't keep iterating. And so their users basically drop off. So most consumer apps, if you look at a curve on them, they have a quick takeoff and then they have a very, very steep decline. You can name probably many, many apps that have kind of followed that curve. And what the successful ones do is they hit that peak, they take the data and they figure out how to retain, and then they continue to grow. But that's actually really, really hard and requires really, really quick product iteration. It requires collecting data. And so a lot of what we do is help those companies collect data on what's working for their users, to experiment on what's not working, to improve what is, and to kind of accelerate that pace of experimentation. And I think that's kind of one of the cruxes of what makes consumer-facing applications work well, is really listening to the users and integrating that into the product. But if you can't do that, it's very difficult. And AI introduces a lot of complexities that I think are very novel. Like Natalie and I were just discussing, people got used to mobile apps over a long time, and you iterate over UI features, buttons, and little things to switch. When you're changing up models and prompts and fine-tuning, those are very, very big changes. And so I think that we're kind of getting to this level now of sophistication of treating AI like we used to treat mobile apps, and that type of iteration and A/B testing that we did there, which is really, I think, what allows them to succeed. And so that's kind of it, is just kind of making sure they're kind of unblocked on that launch, and then they can scale and do that efficiently as well.
Well, Duolingo, speaking of A/B testing, Luis is pretty forthcoming about the belief in A/B testing. You know what Kylan's talking about, from vibe coding to okay first draft to decline. You had that experience with a chess app. You know, Duolingo took a non-coder and a non-chess player and built the first draft of a chess app in about 4 months, I'm thinking.
From 0 to launch was 8 months.
But
Which is quite fast.
tell us about the second 4 months. The first 4 months, it was 2 people sitting on their own, and then you had to decide how we're going to make this into a product.
Yeah, so chess was something that we hadn't been planning on building, and these 2 people had a lot of experience at Duolingo and a lot of trust from our leadership team.
I know what, to be clear, it was the founding head of design and was up-and-coming product manager.
Yeah.
The CEO said, you can't do this, and they said, we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And I think neither of them knew how to play chess.
And neither of them play chess,
Yeah.
and neither of them code. And I've
Well,
completed all 6 course levels in this.
The PM actually majored in computer science, so he did have a little bit of an edge. He had done some coding, but his whole career.
So he's a fake coder, basically.
So he knew enough to be dangerous, and AI was a huge unlock for him. So he was working with the designer. He was basically the software engineering team, the product team, and also the curriculum designer. So what he did is he built the first prototype as a web app using vibe coding and his knowledge of coding. And he built the first content creation tool, and then used that content creation tool to create the content for the initial version of the app. And then it was exciting enough that we decided to fund this team and added just a couple more people. We really only just added maybe 3 engineers to it and a learning designer. And with this very, very small team, we're able to go from that next 4 months to actually launching it on iPhones.
What exactly did they do to scale from kind of alpha to launch? Brought in the extra people. What did they do all day?
Yeah, so the prototype of the web app, this PM was able to do that, but then you actually have to build it on iOS, right? So what he was able to do in something like a few weeks or a month then took a number of months to actually build out.
To make it native iOS.
To make native iOS.
And also, did they have to take it from the web app to then put it on top of the Duolingo kind of learning
Integrated
process?
into the app. Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
There is a whole layer, foundation layer of tech in Duolingo. It used to be called BirdBrain. Is it still BirdBrain?
So BirdBrain is a whole nother thing about the way we personalize lessons, which we're not yet using in chess.
To make sure that people get the amount of difficulty that's right, not for their learning, but to get them to come back. Yeah. Turns out people come back more often if it's easy than if they learn.
He's on our board, by the way.
He knows.
Talk about Duolingo.
He knows stuff. So Kylan, so far, what's the biggest surprise from prospects when you go show them runtime? You know, what didn't you expect from their feedback?
I think that what's been interesting is, so for context, runtime is this tool that we have that actually allows you to build these AI experiences and connect all the models and deploy it very easily and then run the experimentation. And what I kind of expected, but also still surprised me, was like, people are totally fine building stuff now. Like, you have people who have non-computer science degrees who can build entire applications, and everybody has their own entire kind of worlds now that they've coded with bad AI generated code, but it's still easy. What people have found kind of like surprisingly valuable is the experimentation part. So both just the profiling and understanding. So most people who work with AI, you get used to when you're building a consumer application. How many people are signing up? What is my retention? What are my basic metrics there? But there's a lot of metrics when it comes to AI of like, your speed, your quality, your customer experience, your duration of chat, all of those little things that really kind of measure how good it is in the real world. And the reason that I think it's so valuable is the industry tells you to look at these certain benchmarks that the models basically are saying are good or bad. And so effectively they say, okay, great, this model scores best on these 20 different benchmarks, and then you use it in a real world scenario and it doesn't work. And so a lot of people have actually started by using it to kind of profile and understand their application. So understand basically where is it? So where's the quality? Where's the cost? Where's the latency relative to everything else? And then
it's not just a generating app, it's actually quality control.
Exactly. And that's been really interesting. So kind of understanding, is it good or not? And then that kind of leads to the second point, which is where it's good, where it's bad. That gives you kind of the hints of where you want to experiment. Where do I want to actually make the changes? And people are, especially because we work primarily with apps that are at scale or scaling, so they're very sensitive to saying, I don't want to make a change that's going to degrade quality. So people basically want to really get deep in understanding, what is making this good or bad? There's a user experience that's off. I want to go deep. Oh, it's actually that this single model is just taking too long, so I'm going to swap it out for another model. Then I'm going to go in and start running experiments and saying slight tweaks to the prompt that make it happy or sad, or these little things can actually dramatically change the quality of experience. And so I guess I've been surprised to understand just how much people gain out of being like, oh crap, there's a bunch of stuff in my AI application that I just didn't understand. And wasn't even able to measure before. And then being able to actually open up that experimentation has been...
How much time do in-world people have to spend with these customers to help them to figure out how to use the technology? Is it hands-free yet?
I'd say it's almost hands-free. I mean, I'd like to say that we have like a chat bot, in our docs, and it's all very vibe code friendly in that. But the reality is that some of these things people haven't really touched before. So there's observability tools that people have used, there's analytic tools that people have used, but a lot of kind of understanding it in the kind of AI context is kind of new. And so a lot of it, I think, is kind of helping people kind of onboard onto that, but generally it's getting close to hands-free. The thing is, for larger teams, anybody who has experience using AI, it's very much hands-free. There's lots of parallels. But what we see is a lot of people building consumer are usually starting from scratch. They're seed, Series A companies, or just hackers. And those ones, need a little bit of learning because they're used to just, asking ChatGPT how to do everything. And this is actually building a production application, which is a completely different story.
Natalie, by comparison, how do you onboard new CS students? You recruit a lot of them. And I think Luis just announced we're still going to keep intern and new company hires despite what all the other companies are losing faith in young talent. But how do you onboard new talent? How do you get them to understand this deep and complicated Duolingo tech stack?
So Duolingo tech stack in general, or the AI tools in particular?
A little both.
A little both.
I mean, you have to do it all.
Yeah. So
you have to even decide which way you point the new talent to.
New grads have been, as you know, new grads for software engineering have been the lifeblood of software engineering. We have a talent acquisition machine and an onboarding machine that's been going on for years now, and it works really well. So we put our job post on, and we get thousands of applicants within a few days. So we really get our pick of the best and the brightest across the United States, across the world. And so that's great. So we get people who are really, really good, who are really excited to work for Duolingo. And they might have, been using it since middle school. And then we actually start with them when they're still in university. So they come in typically as rising juniors or rising seniors. We have an internship program. So they get to actually learn on the job and prove themselves on the job too. So then if they're doing well, we can give them return offers to come back. So by the time they actually start at Duolingo, they've already had a lot of training. We have we call it hoot camp. We don't call it boot camp, we call it hoot camp. So they start off their internship with a hoot camp where they get deep dives into lots of different topics around software engineering. And then this year has been really interesting because this is the first year where they've also had the opportunity to use AI coding tools as part of that experience. And I was really of two minds about this. One is it's a learning experience, and you really want new software engineers to learn software engineering, not to necessarily just learn how to, you don't want them to be vibe coding their way through their internship experience. And so it actually ended up being really good for them on the whole because they were aware of this themselves and they didn't want to cheat their way through. But what they found is that the AI tools were almost like a second intern host for them, but an intern host that's available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
That's the promise that Rita's talking about, and a little bit, a little bit of Roni Abowitz as well. You create a learning agent that becomes your smart friend, not your competitor.
So you can just go into Cursor or whatnot and ask, help me understand this code base. Help me understand the coding conventions. And it was just a huge unlock for them to be able to learn faster.
And quick turn of topic to character development, with character generation through AI. So you've got Lily, and I'll start with Kylan, because InWorld started out trying to be a platform for kind of open-ended character generation. What did you learn from watching? And Neil Stevenson with his company Whenair is depending on that. So what did you learn about the difficulties of starting with prompts and getting interesting characters with dialogue and behaviors?
Yeah, so when we first started out, our first demo was this really janky Office experience in the Oculus, where I don't know, did you ever play it, Bing? It was really bad, but
I did the Niantic thing.
Oh, that was even better.
And then yeah.
So this was basically, you put on Oculus and you went around and you talked to characters. But this was GPT-3, there was no chat experience, we had to hook it up, and it was one of the first things that people had found, though, where they had a live experience interacting with characters that was powered by AI. This was 2 years before ChatGPT, before Character AI and all of that. And I think what the first thing was people were like, holy shit, this is really cool. Like, just to be able to have that live interaction. So we got to see some of those first responses, I guess, to that. And then I think what happened over time was we decided that the form factor of AI is characters, not just for us, right? So we basically built this kind of as a way to primarily build characters for games, NPCs, learning applications, these kinds of things. And a lot of what we did was built kind of the prompt structure around that to be able to have these real-time interactions to set up the personality. And then what happened with ChatGPT, I think, is that people decided, or we canonically decided, that the form factor that we're all used to interacting with these agents is something like a character, is something like a voice or text-based interface of talking like to a human. And so what that did for us was said, okay, well, that's the new standard, but how do you make that good? And I think a lot of the problems that we found ended up being much lower down. So how do you get it to respond faster? How do you have consistent personality? How do you make sure that the knowledge base is being pulled on reliably? All of those things, which are much, harder problems than just saying, can I have this thing chat? Because at some point that just became the standard. So it's no longer interesting to have it chat. It has to be able to respond well. It has to understand your words. And so basically we just moved lower down to the stack. We focused more on the text-to-speech models, the language recognition models, as well as things like knowledge and that. And then we found that, well, the way we built it initially was this kind of like single box where everybody can build a character the same way. But if you're building a Duolingo character versus you're building a RPG companion character, they actually have completely different architectures. And we kind of think that AI is this kind of standard thing. But because they have some completed architectures, we really had to open up what we did. And that's basically kind of where our journey went, is going lower down in the stack and then opening it up.
And meanwhile, at Duolingo, there's kind of two famous characters at Duolingo. There's Duo the owl, who's handcrafted, and then there's Lily, the purple-haired friend, who's somewhat vibe-crafted. What are the limits of vibe coding a character, or how much of it is human and how much of it is prose in, personality out?
So, well, Lily exists as a character before AI.
Right.
We created a world of characters. Like you said, after Duo, Lily is the most famous one. She's this emo teenage girl who has a lot of character, and she's kind of sassy and sarcastic. She's gotten pretty popular, especially in countries like China, which is interesting.
Where they don't get to sass their elders.
Yeah. That's probably it. In terms of getting her personality through in places like video call, I think a lot of that is basically through the prompt engineering that we do of telling, in this case we're using open AI models, what the character of Lily is like, and to maintain, like you were saying, this consistent tone and interactive style. And then we found that the quality of her personality as it comes through is is really what we put into it. How much depth do we put into her personality? Initially, we had pretty surface level, a small set of things about her that it knew. She has a dog, she plays the guitar, she likes to stay home. And if you just limit it to too short of a backstory, then the conversations start getting pretty repetitive. So it's important to have a fleshed out backstory.
If you printed out all the pre-prompting or meta-prompting of Lily, how many pages would it be?
It's actually really long, which we're thinking actually if you go through it, it's really, really pretty long, because it's not just Lily's personality, it's what an AI tutor how it should behave. It's the kinds of conversational turns, how long the conversation should be, what the learner knows. It just goes on and on for many, many pages.
And I still wish we would prompt some graphic novels about Lily that consumers could learn their language from. Or I'd like to learn
That's
chess
the dream.
from Lily.
We will do this. Eventually, Bing, we will create graphic novels.
And one of the things that I saw happen that changed with Call with Lily over time is the addition of memory, which also is now going on in GPT-5. So what has the inclusion of memory in the LLMs both enabled from an engineering point of view and also challenged? Start Kylan for that.
Well, I was just going to say, because I think it's interesting, that generally we talk about prompts and things, and I think what happened is a few years ago, the way that you thought about customizing any character, any agent, any experience was primarily prompt. Everybody was kind of using the same amount of models. It was, okay, I'm going to change these words, I'm going to tell it to not say this. And what we found is, like, even to build a character, you got to choose, what is the memory? How does it remember things? How do those memories get injected?
And then prompt that? Do you prompt that, or do you engineer that?
So you could, for example, say, am I going to remember everything that you say? Am I going to remember certain things? How am I going to bring them up?
Are you a husband or a wife?
Yeah. Okay. How proactive am I going to be in bringing up the memories that you said, right? So memory, like you're storing it. So we've got very efficient at being able to store those memories. But then they're like the knowledge base. So Lily has this pre-built knowledge base, and now she has a secondary knowledge base that she's learned from you. And then you're going to decide, how am I going to effectively use those during the conversation? Am I going to really bring them up all the time? It's kind of weird, for example, if someone repeats back to you all these things.
In The Sims, we'd have a 10-point rating scale and then do RNG on whether they remember it or not, rather than pre-configure it.
Yeah. And I think that memory is a very interesting thing, because it's like if you talk to someone and they remember every single thing that you said, it's going to be really weird, and especially if they repeat it back to you. And so I think it's not only how do you store that memory, but how do you process it, and then also like conceptual classification. So when you have a memory, it's not necessarily just a list of memories. There's these conceptual spaces of memories. So if you mention something about your pet, and I have an aunt who has a lot of cats, I might bring that up. But if I didn't, for example, associate those two things, so you also need to be able to take those memories, build conceptual spaces around them, so that they organically come up in conversation. Because if I just mention my cat every time you say cat, that's really inorganic.
So you're creating your own vector system.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's how it would sit in our brain, so it makes sense that that's how it would work in the AI as well.
We might be about to run out of time, but just really quickly, so Kylan InWorld has got a blog about runtime, and Natalie has a blog on Duolingo.com basically about how to engineer in a modern fashion, and a lot to learn from both of them. And before we get kicked out, so Natalie, coming to grips with memory availability now in LLMs and memories for Lily. What's the new engineering challenge? Anything to add to what Kylan said?
We've been using memory in Lily for a little while now. I think it's a little bit like what you said. You have to decide how much you want to keep. We keep the past few conversations. For us with Lily, there's a few things that we really care about with video call. We care about getting the difficulty level right. We care about making it a really engaging feature so that users want to have those video calls. And then we also care about the naturalness of the conversation. And I think that's where the memory comes into place, but also a lot more than just memory, of how to have this natural back and forth in the context of all the constraints of it being a learning experience.
I love that Lily always wants to talk to me about sports. I don't know if she likes sports, but she knows that I'll answer.
She does not talk to me about sports.
What does she talk to you about?
Reading books.
Oh, interesting.
Taking walks.
Things like what?
Let's see, are you a host, or should we really stop now, or can we keep going? We really should stop now. Okay, well, Kylan, Natalie,
Thank you.
nice to see both of you in a new place, and see you here next year.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
Thank you.